Hello and welcome. I am Bigfoot, and this is episode 15 of my Let's Play series. So, last episode I just finished upgrading all of my water barrel loops to blue belts, and now what I want to do now is upgrade pretty much everything else. There's a whole load of belts here that need upgrading to blues, and that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just running around doing my upgrade thing, keeping myself busy, getting it finished. And lo and behold, I come across this, and look, we have barrels in my deep storage. And what have we got here? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16 full bins, and then nothing much else. So that's about 8,000 barrels. Plus my, I don't know, 3 or 4,000. Oh, wow, this has got to be full as well then. This has got to be completely full. Oh no, this is 3, 6.8. Oh yeah, this is all full. So, I mean, I mean, not necessarily pleased with that. I mean, it was a cock up, but I did a rough calculation in my head, and it's not a million miles away. I'm quite pleased with that. What's going on down here then? No, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. See that it's just making its way through. Okay, we're all good. When I see that the stuff like that, like with half the belt full, I start to get a little bit worried. Like the earlier problem I was speaking about in the last episode, but that's completely clear. Okay, right, happy. So I mean, the barrel's in the deep storage. So whatever problem that it has is clearly not an instant. It's not when you upgrade these belts. I mean, I think this is probably where I was missing it. Is because you upgrade the belts and it all seems fine, and then over time a surplus is the surplus is generated over time. It's not an instantaneous. The upgrade is instantaneous, but the effect, this overburden effect of these barrels, that's not instantaneous. That takes some time to work its way through the system. Good to know. Good to know. Anyway, back to the upgrade. Upgrades mostly complete now. There's probably a few bits and pieces that I'll need to tinker with as time goes on. But for the most part, I've got all of the resources arriving now at the maximum rate, or at least on the belts they are. I obviously need to set up a whole load of trains and mines and resources to get the actual amounts of materials in, but the belts are at least upgraded. And the thing is, I actually haven't had to wait for any blue belts at all because I'm just producing so many of them. I mean, I don't think I've ever produced this many blue belts before. This is an incredible rate. Normally it just trickles through. I guess that's what happens when you have this many gears. Okay. What I want to do is I want to robot network up my whole jumble. That needs to happen. I've been running back and forth here, dumping all of the stuff back in. Obviously, I'm upgrading some yellow belts, so the yellow belts go back in the box. I'm obviously having to do that by hand at the moment. It'd be really nice just to have that sorted with the robot. So now that everything's upgraded, that's what I'm going to do. I want to get this sorted. I'm just playing around with the positioning of things. What I had originally was my walls, my gates here, and then the walls here. And that left this gap kind of up here unused. I can't fit walls in there. It's not enough space. So I'm going to put gates up there. So I'm just going to move. I'm just moving stuff around. And what I'm coming up with an issue, and that issue is as follows. Here's my wall assembly machines. This is the output. And in order to get somewhere useful, maybe. Wait a second. Am I jumping the gun here a little bit? No, I am jumping. No, not jumping the gun. I need to join this one with the output of this one so that it can split left and right, so that it can go off to science and then off to the gates. That's why I had it positioned the way I had it before, because it just meant that the walls came out, it needed to go in one direction and then it fed down. With me repositioning this, it just kind of makes things a little bit more complicated. But the issue is that this belt, in order to join up with here, has kind of got to work its way around this splitter, and that just looks crap. So I don't really like that. It's just a useful little point for me anyway. You might find it useful. What I do is I just bring this splitter onto the other side, like so. And suddenly I've got my perfect corner back. It's just a nice little detail. Anyway, on with the building. Okay, so now we have, well, we've got a very, very basic roboport network set up. I've got a few logistic robots whizzing around just so that they can feed me what I need when I need it. You can see all these warnings around. I haven't got any construction robots, so I don't like construction robots. Right until the moment where I finish building everything, I don't put construction robots into the network, and the reason is because when I pop down a blueprint, I just want the construction robots in my inventory to build it, because otherwise it takes ages and it messes up. Well, I just don't like it takes ages. I prefer to just use the robots that I have. I don't need. Well, I'm not at the point where I can use construction robots on my robot network, and that probably leads me to the next point. You know, one of the main reasons why you'll need construction robots is because for your perimeter wall. So this temporary short-term perimeter wall that I've built, spent quite a lot of time building. It's not enough. The biters are making. They're just able to make cause a lot of damage, and I'm constantly having to run around and fix it. So I want to get on with the proper full perimeter wall. I want to get that sorted so I can forget about it once and for all, not just temporarily. And in order to do that, I need more power. I mean, it's going to be full of roboports. I'm going to have a whole lot of robots on the network. They're going to be whizzing around here, there, and everywhere. That's going to be extracting a heck of a lot of power out of the system. So before I can really get on with that final version of the perimeter wall, I need to sort out power, nuclear power specifically. The steam turbines, you know, they're never really enough. They're only ever. You're going to have to spend a lot of time if you want to power your factory just from the steam turbines with coal, then, or some other fuel, I suppose. Then you're going to need a lot of them, so many of them that it's just not worthwhile. And if you can get the nuclear set up right, then you basically got limitless power, or at least as much power as your water supply allows you. That's another pertinent reason. You know, I'm limited by water because of the barrels that I've got set up. So that's where I am now. I've moved the time lapse. I mean, it's the first time I've moved the time lapse in it's got to be a week or so. It's been over on the science. I've been busy doing other things. It's good to move it. That's probably going to be the least continuous part of the time lapse. You know, there's going to be a couple of jumps. There's going to be a couple of changes which I didn't capture because it's been there for like 40 hours, and you know I can't have the time lapse running for 40 hours. I'd just be making, just be boring. It'd just be terrible. And you know, it's been there for a week, and I think I've generated about 3 seconds worth of footage. I think I've got 90 screenshots. You know, I've not taken a lot. I've kept it short. That's another, you know, I'm still trying to keep this time lapse short. Anyway, so nuclear power. That's what I'm going to get on with now. I've got this little uranium setup over here that I mentioned, so I can get something into the factory and I can get something moving. And also another thing, I've got this iron setup that I really don't want to lose. And so because the size of this is the same as the size of this, I'm just going to build the bottom half of the nuclear reactor. That should give me enough power. It should give me plenty of power to do all the things that I need to do. And I can leave the coal, the iron alone and just continually mine it. Because it's a big patch of iron. Don't really want to lose it at the moment. If I build the nuclear power and I need more power, then I'll reassess. But for the time being, I'm just going to do the bottom half. And for nuclear power, this is a big old space, by the way. It's you know, there's a lot of space to fill, and I want to get it done elegantly. So I've been thinking about what I need to achieve, and for nuclear power, there's a few kind of different chunks to it, and these chunks are maneuverable. They can move them around, and size, you know, the size of the individual chunks, I can play around with. I can have it process more material if I need to. You know, I can have more storage if I need to. I can play around with those things to get it to fill the space. That's the goal at the end of the day, to fill the space elegantly and to get all of the power that I need to get. Ultimately, if the setup and the factory is slightly bigger than I at this point think it should be, then that just means I have more capacity later down the road. You know, it's not. I really like the nuclear the setup, and if it goes overboard, I'm not really too fussed about that. So the individual chunks that I'm thinking about. So if we move from the start of the chain to the end of the chain, we've got the first step, which would be the train track, the train stations. So I probably want at least 4 train stations to either side, just because I want to have, well, 4 sounds like a good number. It feels like a good number. Obviously, it's not critical. Uranium is not critical for SPM or any of the factory processes, so it's not. You know, not really totally necessary. That's the wrong way to put it. It's not important to the factory how many trains bring in uranium. I've got a little bit more freedom, and I think what I'm going to do is do 2 either side. That seems to make sense in my mind. Then after that, we need a whole load of centrifuges to process the uranium into the individual nuclear elements, so U235 and U238. That block, you know, I'll try and relate it back to the capacity of the train stations, but again, if it gets a little bit bigger or is a little bit smaller than I need to be, that's not the end of the world. After that, it needs to go to some storage, so I need 2 sets of storage, one for U238, and this is more or less just bulk storage. I just need a lot of storage boxes. I'm going to have a lot of U238, and it really isn't important. It's just I just need to have a lot of storage somewhere for it to go. So in my mind, I'm thinking somewhere between 100 and 200 chests either side. So for this half, somewhere between 100 and 200 chests. That's what I'm going to be aiming for. And then for U235, in order to what I'm trying to achieve is to match the factory to what it needs to produce. So what it needs to produce is 19 times more U238 than U235 in order to produce the perfect amount of nuclear fuel. So that's the balance that I'm looking for. So if for U235 I need less boxes because there's less of it, but the setup is a little more complicated because it needs to go to several different places. U238 it just needs to go in and feed out, whereas U235 it needs to act as a switch to control when the Koverex process takes place. So if we're looking for between 100 and 200 boxes for U238, then we're probably looking for between 5 and 10. If we're looking for this 1:19 ratio, we're looking for between 5 and 10 boxes for U235. And you know, 5 and 10 is awkward. I'll probably just round it up to something useful, which would be 16. That's probably what I will do. Just slightly more storage. That's fine. After we've got the 2 storage boxes, and these the two storage chunks, and these are there not just to store the materials that we're producing, but also to measure them as well, because I don't want the Koverex process to run all of the time. If it runs all of the time, then we end up in a situation where we've got everything is U235 and we haven't got any U238. Like the proportions just run out of control. I want to be able to measure how much is in the system to control when that Koverex process takes place. And obviously it's only going to take place when the proportion is above 19. So I'm going to measure the two boxes, divide one by the other, and if it's greater than 19, then I want the Koverex process to run. If it's less than 19, then I want the Koverex process to stop. And that's what those two chunks are going to do. They're going to store the materials and they're going to measure it so I can perform this calculation. Then obviously I need the Koverex process. So I need a whole bank of centrifuges so that the U238 can be converted into U235. That's a process that takes a long time. So they're big blocks. There's going to be at least two of these loops. So, but see, the base is they're just getting through. They're just getting through. Up here particularly. So I need to get on with this. So, and then so that's the Koverex process. What other? That's probably all of the chunks, to be honest. Trains, refining, storage, and then Koverex. So 5 chunks. You know, if we count the storage as 2 individual chunks. And now it's just a case of how do I arrange them on the map? You know, how am I going to do that? So I've moved the camera already. That's already done. So I'm going to start playing around with how I want to arrange it on the map. And I also want to include the racetrack. I want to put a loop in the racetrack around the nuclear power. So I've got this straight that runs down here. I want to divert it in somewhere, come around, divert it around. And this is going to be completely symmetrical. I'm not too worried about making this asymmetrical for this. I'm just a little detour around the nuclear power and back again. Also, you know, the nuclear power creates this grid of heat pipes that's over 1,000 degrees, and I want the racetrack to run through that. I want to have a 1,000-degree part of my racetrack. That's cool. I did it in my last one. So yeah, I want to run the racetrack through the middle of the reactors when I get there, come back to this main straight, and then work my way around. So it's just a case of how I work out how to arrange those chunks, how big those chunks need to be, and then finding an elegant way to arrange it on the map. Yep. Just a post-edit note, I obviously didn't mention the nuclear powers as one of the chunks. So there's 6 chunks if you include the nuclear reactors and all of the associated heat exchangers and turbines and the heat pipes that you need to go with it. That would be the 6th chunk. I mean, the reason why I didn't mention it is because I've already positioned it in my mind, and that's going to be determined by where the racetrack goes. So the only things that I have real freedom to play with their positioning on the map is the other chunks. And because of the way that that's worked in my mind, it meant that I didn't mention the nuclear reactors. But they are another chunk. If you're, when you're building this, if you're looking to, kind of bullet point your way through nuclear power, that would be another chunk to add to that list. I just wanted to clarify that. It has probably been a week or so. Got to be at least a week since I last talked. And that's because, well, a couple of reasons actually. Firstly, it's summer, so I play a lot of sports in the summer. I play a lot of cricket and golf, so that's kind of getting in the way of things. I've also got work. My work picks up during the summer months. My peak YouTubing hour times of the year during the winter months when I don't have too much work, and that's starting to kick into gear. However, even when I've turned on Factorio, got my work done, got everything sorted by a reasonable hour, and turned on Factorio, I've just been staring at this nuclear setup. I've just ended up, right, let's go, let's do it, come on, let's get going. And then I turn it on and I'm like, where do I go? What do I do? And then I've played around with a little bit. I played around with the railways for a very, very long time. Just fiddling, didn't like it. Stop playing, pause it, watch some YouTube, do something else, think about things. What am I going to do? Come back about half hour later, try another thing. And this whole nuclear setup has just been that over and over again. So I'd get one element sorted, then I think, well, where do I go next? And it's taken me a long time to get it to a point where I'm happy. It's not perfect, but I'm happy. So, okay, let me take you through it. So, train stations, these are a pain. I'm happy with where they are now. The ore comes off the train, comes right the way through here, past the railway, past the racetrack, and to these centrifuges on the other side. So, one of the things that I was looking at was, well, this is small. This is not a big setup. There's a lot of centrifuges, yeah, but in comparison, where I wanted to put it was up here, but it's just too small to go in that space. It would just leave too many big gaps. So I've kind of brought it the other side of the racetrack, which I do have space for here, and I do have space for it on the other side up here as well, which I was conscious of. I didn't want it to collide with something else, so it's in a good place, but this big gap has been awkward. So what I've done is just filled it with storage chests. So over on this side we've got all the stuff for U238, and right back at the beginning, probably not that long ago in the video, but a long old time in actual time. I think I said 100, somewhere between 100 and 200 chests. Well, I've got 480. I had to fill the space. I just had to fill the space, so I've got 480 of them. And because I'm still trying to keep to that 19 to 1 ratio, I still remember this. The ratio that I would need for 480 chests would be about 25 chests for U235, so I've got 32 chests for U235 in kind of 4 little groups. Each of these 2 groups are joined together to form a single Koverex loop. So this should give me a fair amount of processing capacity when the factory is capable of doing so. We're a long way away from that at the moment. So those are the 2 kind of chunks of the storage chests: railway stations and the ore processing. So all of this stuff, kind of, well, the U235, the process is for it to come all the way over here, over to what was the first thing that I built. And to be honest, this kind of sat down, I put it in the space and I was more or less happy with it straight away. This was relatively straightforward. It made a nice gap for a racetrack, so I just kind of stuck it there and I was happy. So Koverex, the U235, U238 comes over here for the Koverex. That goes back again to the storage, and it kind of goes round and round and round and round until the correct proportion is reached with whatever is stored in here. So up here I've got these are the things that are doing the calculations. So I've got U238 divided by U235 equals Z, and then if we go over to these inserters, not these ones, the U235 ones, then I've got them set up as a trigger on these 2 belts. So the red belts go to nuclear fuel, the blue belts go to the Koverex process. If Z is greater than 19, then I want it to go to the Koverex process. If Z is less than 19, then I want it to switch over and go to nuclear fuel. So that's how I've switched all of that together. That's why these belts, these collection of storage chests are a little bit more complicated than this, is because these need 2 outputs. I mean, I've also gone to my kind of standard distribution. This is how I try and generate a pure flow to each chest. I want to try and guarantee that each chest has got the same amount of ore in it at the same time. So the belt comes in, gets split 2 ways, that gets split 2 ways, that gets split 2 ways, that gets split. So hopefully, at least the distribution is as even as I can get it. It's not going to be perfect, but it doesn't really need to be perfect. It's not like the barrels where I need it to be perfect. So, I mean, if I wanted to, I could set up a whole another circuit network which controlled... Oh, hang about, what's going on here? I could set up a whole circuit network which controlled the input to the chest, so that it only would input to the chest when this is less than everything divided by 8. So it keeps all of... That's what I've done with the barrels. So I times... Yeah, it's complicated. I'm not doing that now. Anyway, I could have gone to a lot more lengths to keep these chests even, but it's, you know, there's only so much. It doesn't need to be completely perfect. Then all of that stuff, all that gumph gets fed over here. So originally I was going to put it over on the other side of the racetrack, but it kind of... A little hole developed in here for the nuclear fuel and the centrifuge to process the spent fuel. That was something that I haven't watched back the video back the last time I talked. I didn't mention. There was a little chunk that I didn't mention. Obviously, I've got the other 6 chunks that I did mention. I think it was 6. And then there's a last little one for the nuclear fuel and the processing. But I mean, it's tiny in comparison to all the other bits. It just kind of... for me, it just kind of I find a space where it can go. It's just the belts going to and from it are always a bit of a pain because there's a fair amount of them in comparison to the amount of units doing any factory work. But that's just a case of routing it. Okay. Anyway, so that's nuclear fuel comes out, and then that distributes to all of these nuclear power stations. Obviously, this is my racetrack, so this is my theoretically 1,000-degree road. And when I did this on my last racetrack, it took an absolute age for this to heat up. These heat pipes, that's what it is. But as far as I'm aware, there's no heat lost. These things are 100% efficient. So once it gets to 1,000 degrees, it doesn't really matter because this isn't going to lose any heat. It just takes a long while to get up to the right temperature. That's my understanding of the game. If I'm incorrect, maybe someone can correct me on that. But yeah, so there's my nuclear power stations. That is the nuclear setup. And I'm really quite happy with the racetrack. That's kind of... If you imagine this is going to be the same but mirrored on the other side, so the racetrack's going to do exactly the same. It's going to come around in here. And this is going to be another one of my options where I can cut off a certain part of the racetrack. And so I'm going to have several different racetrack options. I'm also looking at gaps where I can maybe feed the racetrack through. That looks like a good gap. So I can generate another option so I can cut out the coal. There might be 7 or 8 different racetracks around here. It might be quite cool. I have been thinking about how I'm going to build the circuit network for those switches, because if it was just, say, one switch where you switch off one set of gates and turn on the others, then it'd be really straightforward. But I'm going to have to come up with some sort of logistical system which... Because I've only got access to switches which will switch on or off, so I haven't got like a bullet, what's it called? Command buttons or whatever, like in Excel, you know, where you can select different buttons and it will deselect the other buttons. I don't have access to that. So I need to come up... I've been thinking about how I'm going to come up with that. That's probably, to be fair, that's a long way away. I mean, this base has just taken a ridiculous amount of time. I've been sitting thinking, running around, and I'm still... So one thing I really need, what I really need is like rocket jetpacks for my armor. But I just haven't had time. I just haven't had the time to deal with it. I've been dealing with so much other things in game, not outside in real world, but dealing with so many things in game that I haven't had time. And normally with these factories, there's a moment where there's a lull, where I'm waiting for something to happen. You know, there's a few hours where something is a certain amount of resources need to build up before I can do something else. And I just kind of potter around the factory fixing little problems. And I just haven't had those sorts of times. I haven't had times. I mean, one of those moments would have been when the blue belts were building up. That generally, there's probably, you know, I've spent hours waiting for that to build up in other factories. But in this one, it was straight away. I had access to, I had so many gears being produced that I had all the blue belts that I needed, so I didn't have that time. So I haven't had a moment to. There's so many little things I need to clear up around this factory. Little annoying details that just aren't right. I just can't get to them. And the jetpack, I really need the jetpack. That's another thing, you know. It's important. It's sometimes strange how you have to prioritize certain things. It probably wouldn't take me very long to get the jetpack. But the fuel for the jetpack, I still haven't sorted out my rocket fuel set. I need to sort out where the ammo comes through. So I need to demolish all of this and rebuild it. And I need to... I suppose the reason why I'm talking about all of this is because I think I'm going to have a moment now where I don't have anything to do. You know, this nuclear power, it's all being generated from this tiny little patch over here, which maybe I've got, what, 20, 25, 30 mining drills? I mean, I've juiced them all up with... speed modules, so they're going as fast as they can, but that's still going to take a long old time. At the moment, all I'm doing is shipping in sulfuric acid, storing the uranium ore in boxes, just so that I can, when I get to the point where I want to turn on the uranium, I've got something to do it with for the time lapse sake. Just so, you know, if it comes in dribbles, it's going to look it's going to be it's not going to necessarily look bad. It's just going to be difficult to control what sort of frame rate I need to use. What I really need to have is a situation where I have a huge dump of uranium in the beginning, so that I can do that kind of set piece so showing it flow through the factory, and then once that has taken place, I can slow the time lapse down and let it run at its natural pace. So I need that kind of big kind of blodge of uranium ore stored, so that I can get that set piece sorted and worry about it later. And because from this time it's going to take ages. So I'm going to have to run it at a really low frame rate over a very, very long stretch of time, and maybe cut out some frames when I get to the editing phase. Yeah. So whilst that's building up, I don't really have anything else I want to get on with. I've pulled in all of the trains. None of the trains are moving now, other than uranium. What actually happened was the trains ran out of fuel, and that has actually been another really annoying thing that I haven't mentioned, along with the biters and mainly just the biters. You know, having to repair my perimeter wall. But the trains are continually running out of fuel, and because it's not on the robot network. You know, the robot network doesn't stretch to any train stations just yet. So I'm having to run around filling up these damn trains. So what happened was the trains ran out of two trains ran out of fuel, sat in the middle of the junction, and just completely stopped the whole network. And what actually gave me some respite from the biters. They left me alone for a little while. So I've been able to concentrate on the nuclear power a little bit more than I would otherwise have been, because the trains haven't been running. So before I set this in motion, I just pulled all of the trains into the station, let everything quiet down, just concentrate on not sulfuric acid, on uranium. You know, I've got enough material in the factory now to do most of the things that I need to do. Crucially, my entire conveyor belt ammunition loop, is completely full of red ammunition now. So, whatever, that was something that I obviously was trying to build up towards. There's a lot of ammunition in here, and I need it to be completely full, so that the moment a turret runs out, it can pick something up. So that's all full now. So the factory, it can run a little bit slower. I've got all of the things I need. So from here, for the moment anyway, I'm just going to let that little store of uranium ore build up for, I don't know, an hour or two maybe. I'm just going to run around the base, try and fix some problems. Oh, this is something I didn't mention actually. This was like a gap that appeared as a result in the process of building this whole nuclear setup, and I've decided to fill it with one of my lighting arrays. So over on the left that's how much U238 is in the system. I know that the bottom light is on. That's just because I needed it to be, I wanted to show that it was working. It's, yeah, anyway, it's set to greater than equal to 0, so it's always going to be on. I just wanted to make sure it was all set up right. So this one on the left deals with U238. This one on the right deals with U235. What I do want to put an array in here which shows that proportion, that ratio of this one divided by this one. So it would be kind of a series of lights where the lights would light up depending on a particular row, depending on where that proportion was. So if the proportion was high, the lights at the top would turn on, and if the proportion was low, then the lights at the bottom would turn on. But I've got a really the way I've been thinking about it, it's a really complicated way of doing it. The way I did it before was just with one row of lights turning on, but it doesn't look very good. You know, if you've got this enormous bank of lights and you've just got one row of lights turning on, it just doesn't look very good. What I want is 3 or 4 rows of lights to turn on, but that means that I need to set up quite a complicated circuit network, which I don't know whether it's even worth. Firstly, I don't even know if it's completely possible. I think it is. I think I've got an idea of how I could do it, but if it is possible, it's so much work that I'm not sure whether it's worthwhile. Well, none of this is worthwhile, to be honest, but you know, these lighting arrays, it's just for my own vanity's sake. But there is a point at which this was a pain to set up, but it was, I got it, you know, it was maybe half an hour to get the 2 of them done. This one I reckon could take me an hour or 2. And I haven't really worked out whether it's worthwhile yet. I suppose what will happen now is I'll run around and fix some things, wait for the uranium to build up, and if I come back and I've done all the things that I felt like I needed to do, then I'll do that with some time. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be working on. I just want to run around and fix some things, clear up some mess. I've got collections of these boxes set up in places. That one's not necessarily a problem. This is my nuclear stuff that I put here so that I could build that stuff, and it's all the stuff that I would need to build the other half. So I'm not going to move that. But this is all stuff from just moving around these science belts, which I need to do again. So these are the sorts of things that annoy me. And I've got these sorts of things. I've got collections of these with barrels in them, all over the place. Just running past them annoys me. So I want to get these back into the system. So whilst the uranium is building up, that's what I'm going to be doing. I don't know whether I'm going to be able to capture this much for the Let's Play video. It's not really. It's just me running it anyway. That's the plan. The barrel saga continues. If we're looking here now at my deep storage, we have way a lot of barrels. That's a lot of barrels. That's the that's the kind of dose of barrels that will completely overwhelm the system and leave you thinking, what the hell am I doing here? Where is it going wrong? Right, I just want to check, see this is still. See, that was the thing. That was my thinking. If this is full, but this is empty, then that means that these loops are still drawing barrels out. But this is still completely full, so no new barrels have gone in for some time. I mean, that's partially a consequence of me calling in all the trains. You know, the power draw is right down to basically nothing at the moment, and so not many barrels are being used. Not many are going on. Not many are going in the loops, and therefore barrel flux is right. The barrel flux itself is right low, right at the bottom. This is the minimum amount of draw it will have. Maybe it might even be a smaller draw if when nuclear power is switched on, because that uses water more efficiently and will use less barrels. And if we're using the same amount of power, anyway. The point what I was getting at was that this deep storage has become a lot more useful than I thought it was going to be. That's much more barrels. Many more barrels than I even anticipated it being. So anyway, that's something to definitely consider for my next base. Definitely needs it. Definitely going to factor it one way or the other. So what I was doing was just running over here just to see. Just see how my uranium is doing. Ah, we are completely full already. Right, okay. That did not take very long at all. More. So obviously what I'm waiting for now is for 40 pieces of these light green pieces of uranium so that I can start the first Koverex process going. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to set it up with a few boxes. Set the first one up with a few boxes. Let's use this one right here. Set it up with a few boxes with some speed modules, and then once I've got enough to, might get a second or third one going, and then eventually I'll take whatever I've made out of here and put it in the main boxes and get the whole thing going for good. Because you don't have too many of these bits of Koverex, too many of these bits of uranium, this is the best way to go. Otherwise, it ends up spreading that throughout the whole of this process, and you need to concentrate on. Well, this should all be obvious, I'm sure. Okay, so more. 39? Where's the 40th? I'm sure I just saw it a moment ago. You two will do nicely. Excellent. Okay, come on. Come on, you can do it. There we go. And we are off. Now just more waiting. Lots more waiting. I've got the full Koverex process running now on both loops. I've only got it hooked up with a few of the centrifuges, so I've got a priority on the right, but that doesn't really matter, I suppose. That probably only matters in the fullness of time, but I've disconnected everything else. So, and then I've disconnected this one as well, so it only feeds 6 of the centrifuges, and all of those have got speed modules. And I'm doing the same down here, exactly the same. I'm feeding 6, and they've all got speed modules. Now, obviously, I've kind of made a rod for my own back slightly, because you know the efficiency is greatly reduced with the fact that this is so far away from where it's being stored. Obviously, if I had have just, for instance, positioned this storage right over here and shifted all the U238 to the right, then it would get them. It would get them about, I don't know, probably at least half the time, and it would therefore cycle its way through much quicker. But that it wouldn't have worked the way that I wanted it to. And you know, this is a racetrack. The racetrack almost takes priority. As long as this works, I'm not really too fussed, and this will definitely work. It just means that it needs a lot of U235 in the system for it to work. It's going to take a while. And also, looking at the map, you know, I'm already about 15-20% through this this patch of ore, so it's going to slow down. And yeah, so what I'm thinking, I mean, once I've got nuclear power sorted, then the next thing I want to do is my perimeter wall. And what I really need is for there to be a conveniently placed patch of uranium for me to use that's more than a couple of million. I need a big patch. I need to get a lot in. So, although I've just been running around putting in my robot network, and it is coming together, like it's filling up. It's not too much work, but it's a little bit laborious. It's just a bit of a pain. But because of these lanes I've got, it's relatively straightforward. So I'm just going to take a break from that and go and look for some uranium. That's what I'm going to do. So, short answer, no. Long answer, yeah. I mean, I've got two patches that I've uncovered. I've done a fair amount of exploring. I've got this patch down here. You know, very juicy, very tempting. But, you know, in order to route a perimeter wall around it, it would be right out of the way. So, that's out of reach. It's also completely surrounded by these huge nests. I mean, that's not necessarily a problem in itself. But, yeah, out of reach. And so is this one, really. I mean, this one is a third of the size. And it's kind of even further away. So it's not even worth thinking about. There is a potential for, like, an island to exist in the middle of here with the uranium patch. But, you know, highly doubtful. Similarly over here, you just don't know. But until I really get the jetpack, can't really explore. I'm not really ready for the jetpack. I need white sight. I want the final version of it. I don't want to start messing around with the non-final version. I'm quite happy with the Exos for the time being. It's not critical. The biters aren't really attacking me all that much, so I'm just pottering about for the time being. I don't really necessarily need the jetpack. The Koverex process is whizzing around. Obviously, that's doing its thing. I've just tried to do some I've done some calculations. I haven't tried to. I have done some calculations to try and work out how much of these individual types of ore I'm going to get from this 2.2 million patch that I've got access to. What I've tried to work out is how many trips through a centrifuge the U235 needs to make through in order to get the right sort of proportion. Obviously, every time it makes a trip through a centrifuge, I lose three bits of U238. So I've done a little equation to work out how many times it needs to go through. And with 8,600 trips through a centrifuge, I will work from 2.2 million patch of ore. I will end up with 192,660 U238 and 10,140 U235. I mean, obviously that's just a purely theoretical mathematical calculation. There's obviously going to be a whole load of U235 on the map. When the inserters to these chests switch over, all of the pipes that lead to the Koverex process will be completely full of U235. So that's almost lost in the system. It's just the cost of doing business to a certain extent. You know, these factories, there's a critical, not necessarily critical point. You only reach full efficiency when all of the pipes are filled. That's the way that I kind of term it. So every assembly, every conveyor belt, every pipe, every process needs to be completely full up to the maximum. Thank you, phone. In order to achieve maximum efficiency, because then at that point your factory is only replacing the things that you use. Anytime up to that point, your factory is still trying to overcome filling it in the first place. So yeah, there's going to be 4,000 or 5,000 U235 I'm going to lose just on the map. So 3 times that is 15. So I'm probably going to end up with about 175,000 ish U238. I suppose that's going to be enough. I suppose. You don't. It should be fine. Should be fine. I've got nothing else to do. I've got nothing else to work with, so it's going to have to be fine. If it's not, then I'll have to jerry rig some way of forcing the fuel through. I mean, it's not jerry rig. I mean, I can just pick up a whole load of U235 off the map. I mean, I've probably got plenty on here to get the nuclear power going for a significant period of time, enough time for it to continue running it through these loops. I could probably get that going, but if it wasn't a time lapse, that's what I would do. But because of the time lapse, I want to capture everything. So I want to capture the moment where it switches over. I want to capture that. So I mean, the time lapse is still going. It's running at, what is it, 1 every 2 minutes. I'm trying to do kind of 30 to 40 frames at a set frame rate, and then I'm reducing it as I go. So right at the beginning when I brought in ore, I was going at 12 frames a minute, and then after about 30 or 40 frames I brought it down to 8, and then another 30 or 40 frames I brought it down to 6 I think, and then down to 4, then down to 2, then down to 1. Then I went to 1 frame every 90 seconds. Now I'm at 1 frame every 2 minutes. And where am I at the moment? In about 5 frames, so that's about 10 minutes. I'll be going to 1 frame every 4 minutes. At the moment, the total amount of time spent on this kind of getting the uranium sorted for the nuclear process is about just over 9.5 seconds. I am spending a lot of time of the time lapse here. I want to get it, you know, it's a nice thing that I like to have. So I suppose what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to crack on with my robot port network. That's what needs to happen. I've got nothing else to do with my time. Yep, that's what needs to happen. Have I got enough supplies? Yes, I do. Okay, let's get going. Alright, it is preemptive action time. Okay, so what I'm worried about, I know I did my little calculation and everything, but the problem is time. I've been trying to keep an eye on how much U238 is in the system. What I don't want to do is have the whole thing run away, so I don't have any U238 left by the time this starts filling up. Because obviously I'm going to need, as I said, you know, 5,000, 6,000 of this U235 just to fill up the pipes, and that's going to be, you know, I've got all of this running through the loop, but none of it is being stored. So I'm pretty sure if I stopped this from running and put all of this into these storage boxes, it would be enough for the right proportion for the amount of U238 in the system. And I have, as I said, I've just been keeping an eye on it, and it was about 32 grand 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago. Now it's down to 28. So that's starting to dip below what I want. So I'm just gonna preemptively flip it over to fuel. And the way I'm going to do that is, hold on a sec, let me just set up the time lapse. Let's make sure I've got this set up right. Let's do that. The way I'm going to do it is I'm just going to dump a whole load of theoreticals into the system. In fact, can I do it? Yeah, okay, let's do it on a separate one. This way I can just delete it when it's done. So I'm going to tell the system that it's suddenly got 5,000 in the system, and that will should switch it over. Yeah. Nice. Okay, that'll do. Okay, so if we look at what we've got in the system, we've got 7,000 U235. I've put 5,000 in there artificially, so we've only got 2,000. And in order to meet our 19 ratio for 27k, we only need 1.5. So we've easily got enough in the system. I'm going to go and delete this now. That shouldn't change anything. Yeah, we've got a Z of 8. Is that right? Yeah, because we've got plenty of, absolutely plenty. Right, so now we just need to wait for this to heat up. There are some weeks in this business where I get up on Monday, more often than not on a Monday, look in my diary and I see what I've got planned for the week, and it's empty. I've got nothing, nothing at all. Completely free week. And then I get 3, 4 phone calls, 2, 3 text messages, and that's exactly what's been happening today. I just, yeah, thought I had a free week, and it's not going to be a free week. Anyway, back to where I was. So, fuel is now flowing through, and I just need to wait for stuff to heat up. I mean, that was more or less the end of what I was talking about, but I needed like 5 more seconds of clear air time, but 5 more seconds before you phoned me, Mrs. Client. Yeah. So I mean, this episode has taken. It's a long old episode, and it's not been helped by, me talking for about 20 minutes right in the middle of it, non-stop. That's the longest unplanned bit of speech I've done on this whole Let's Play series, without a doubt. This whole nuclear setup did vex me while I was building it. I suppose that was kind of a side effect of that vexation, was me going on a bit of a ramble. But for today, that's enough. Next episode, we're going to let this heat up. That's probably, I mean, I'm just going to let this sit here for a little while, let it heat up. And then we can get on with some other interesting things. I have a plan. Yeah. The next video is going to be a bit different. Anyway, I hope it's been entertaining. I hope you're still here, so stuck around for the whole hour. I mean, it's nearly an hour. Till next time.